Welcome to Ascension HFY Extra, your ultimate destination for exploring the most thrilling and mysterious aspects of our universe. Here, we dive deep into the unknown, unearthing the secrets of alien civilizations, intergalactic phenomena, and the hidden truths that the galaxy's most powerful beings have been desperately trying to keep under wraps. From chilling UFO encounters to the most mind-boggling alien conspiracies, we bring you stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, wondering what's really out there. In this episode, we embark on a journey like no other, exploring the terrifying mystery of Earth's disappearance from the Galactic Senate. What was humanity hiding? What is the Senate so afraid of? As secrets are revealed and the truth behind Earth's absence unravels, prepare yourself for an epic adventure filled with ancient fleets, terrifying forces, and revelations that will change everything you thought you knew about the galaxy. In the heart of the galaxy's most powerful institution, the Senate chamber stretched out like a darkened abyss, a vast and silent space, its grandeur matched only by its solemnity. The long, polished table gleamed under dim lights, a stark contrast to the shadowed ceiling that seemed to stretch forever above. The chairs around the table were occupied by representatives of 1,000 civilizations, the wise far with their pale, smooth skin, the foreigners, tall and proud, with their warrior-like stature, and many more. But at the very center, the most important seat in the galaxy, the one that commanded the most attention, stood empty. KYX, a young diplomat from the Foreign Confederacy, sat in his designated place. His 4 fingers tapped restlessly on the smooth metal surface of the table, betraying the nervous tension that ran through him. His eyes flickered around the room, but he couldn't ignore the emptiness that seemed to whisper through the vast chamber. The seat that was always vacant, the seat of Earth. He had heard the rumors, the whispers among the senators. Everyone had their own theory, but none of them made any sense. It had become a strange, unsettling mystery that hovered over every session, like a dark cloud that no one dared to question. Why is Earth's seat always empty? The question echoed in his mind. Unable to resist, KYX raised his voice, letting the thought spill into the room. KYX. Why is Earth's seat empty? The chamber fell into a profound silence. It wasn't a silence of calm, but one of deep discomfort. Some senators shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged quick, wary glances, as if hoping someone else would speak first. Even the normally stoic far elder, whose age had clouded his eyes and twisted his voice, let out a long, deliberate breath. His expression was unreadable, but there was a tremor beneath his ancient gaze that spoke of a history long buried. Far elder. Because they do not need to. And that terrifies us all. The words hit like a cold wind sweeping through the chamber. KYX's breath caught in his throat. He had expected something, perhaps an answer, or an explanation, but not this. The rest of the room held their breath, as if frozen by the elder's statement. KYX's mind raced. He looked around, trying to read the expressions of the other senators, but no one met his gaze. It was as if they were all bound by an unspoken rule, a code that forbade them from speaking the truth. KYX. But they are just another species, like us. Why should we fear them? A ripple of discontent ran through the room, but before anyone could respond, a deep growl reverberated through the chamber. The Chancellor, Ovar, a towering reptilian figure from the Svar Dominion, lifted his massive head. His scales gleamed under the faint light as his eyes narrowed, burning with contempt. Ovar, enough talk. Earth is irrelevant. We do not speak of them because there is nothing to speak of. But KYX could feel it, the tension that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't just the silence that unnerved him, but the palpable fear that clung to it. It was as if the very mention of Earth triggered something in the room. A memory long buried, or a forbidden thought no one dared to acknowledge. He leaned back in his chair, unable to shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. His thoughts swirled, trying to make sense of the fear, the silence, the empty throne. Then, without warning, a loud beeping interrupted the uneasy stillness. The Senate chamber lights flickered as the room's main display activated, the familiar blue glow of an emergency transmission lighting up the room. The senators sat upright, their eyes fixed on the screen, the tension growing thick as the transmission began to play. The video feed was grainy, the image shaky, as though the source had been damaged. A figure appeared on the screen. Barely visible, their voice distorted by static. Distress signal. We found it. We found the truth. The Senate must know. The message cut off abruptly, leaving only the eerie static behind. The room remained silent, save for the sound of the transmission's interference. KYX. Whispering. Confused. Where did this come from? An officer from the Senate's security team stepped forward, his face pale as he glanced nervously at the gathered senators. Officer. It's from an abandoned human research station. KYX's heart skipped a beat. The humans had abandoned the station centuries ago, at least. That was what everyone had been told. Yet here it was, an urgent message from that same forgotten place. A place that was supposed to be long silent. Forgotten by the galaxy. Why now? Why this sudden transmission after so long? KYX felt a rising unease in his chest. A deep, gnawing suspicion. He had to know more. The Senate wasn't offering any answers, and the growing sense of fear in the room only pushed him to seek the truth for himself. KYX. I need answers. Later that night, when the chamber had emptied and the Senate complex had quieted, KYX found himself walking through darkened hallways. The low hum of the building's power systems his only company. He made his way to the restricted archives. A labyrinth of locked doors and classified information. No one was supposed to access these records. No one except the highest-ranking members of the Senate. But KYX wasn't about to let something as trivial as security stop him. He pulled out a small device. A hacking tool his people had perfected over generations. Within seconds, the security door clicked open, and KYX slipped inside, his heart pounding with anticipation. Rows of glowing data terminals filled the room, each one holding centuries of hidden knowledge. His hands shook as he searched through the records, his eyes scanning rapidly. Finally, he found what he was looking for. A file labeled, Final Senate Report on Earth's Withdrawal. He hesitated for a moment, a cold shiver running down his spine. This was it, the truth. The very thing that the Senate had been so desperate to keep hidden. He opened the file, and the screen flickered to life, revealing a video log. The figure of a human, tall and clad in an ancient military uniform, appeared on the screen. His face was grim, his voice steady but heavy with finality. Admiral Graves. This is Admiral Daniel Graves of the Terran Defense Fleet. Earth will no longer participate in the Senate. We are withdrawing from all intergalactic affairs effective immediately. KYX leaned closer to the screen, the words from the Admiral stirring something deep inside him. Admiral Graves. We have seen what lies beyond this universe. The Senate is blind. We are leaving not out of fear, but because we must prepare. When the day comes, we will be ready. Pray that we never return. The message flickered out of existence, vanishing into the void. The file deleted itself immediately, as if it had never existed. KYX staggered back, his mind reeling. What had the humans seen? What were they preparing for? And why had they left the galaxy in such a mysterious way? His thoughts whirled, and for the first time since stepping into the Senate, he felt the weight of the fear that had gripped the room. The fear of Earth, the fear of something humanity knew, but the Senate was too blind to understand. The room around him grew colder, and he knew then that his quest for answers had only just begun. A ripple of discontent ran through the room, but before anyone could respond, a deep growl reverberated through the chamber. The Chancellor, Ovar, a towering reptilian figure from the Svar Dominion, lifted his massive head. His scales gleamed under the faint light as his eyes narrowed, burning with contempt. Ovar, enough talk. Earth is irrelevant. We do not speak of them because there is nothing to speak of. But KYX could feel it, the tension that hung in the air. Thick and suffocating. It wasn't just the silence that unnerved him, but the palpable fear that clung to it. It was as if the very mention of Earth triggered something in the room. A memory long buried, or a forbidden thought no one dared to acknowledge. He leaned back in his chair, unable to shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. His thoughts swirled, trying to make sense of the fear, the silence, the empty throne. Then, without warning, a loud beeping interrupted the uneasy stillness. The Senate chamber lights flickered as the room's main display activated, the familiar blue glow of an emergency transmission lighting up the room. The senators sat upright, their eyes fixed on the screen, the tension growing thick as the transmission began to play. The darkness in the room thickens as the screen flickers, its cold glow illuminating KYX's face in sharp relief. A low hum fills the air. And for a moment, the flickering static on the screen seems to grow louder, as if the universe itself is holding its breath. Then, the image stabilizes, revealing the figure of a human in a military uniform. His presence is imposing, his eyes, filled with the weight of centuries, locked directly into the camera. The man's face, however, remains grave, as if burdened with knowledge he cannot escape. This is Admiral Daniel Graves, a name that will soon become a key to a forgotten, terrifying chapter in the galaxy's history. Admiral Graves. This is Admiral Daniel Graves of the Terran Defense Fleet. Earth will no longer participate in the Senate. We are withdrawing from all intergalactic affairs effective immediately. KYX's heart skips a beat. The words echo in his ears, reverberating against the walls of the dimly lit archive. For a moment, he wonders if this is some kind of elaborate hoax, a test. But then the Admiral's next words bring with them a cold, hard certainty that pierces through any doubt. Admiral Graves. We have seen what lies beyond this universe. The Senate is blind. We are leaving not out of fear, but because we must prepare. When the day comes, we will be ready. Pray that we never return. The Admiral's voice falters slightly as he says the final sentence, a heavy warning in the cold depths of his tone. As the words linger in the air, a chill sweeps through the room, one that goes deeper than the physical cold of the chamber. It is as if the Admiral is not just speaking of the withdrawal of Earth but something far darker. Something that had been buried in the dark folds of the galaxy's forgotten corners. Something the Senate had deliberately ignored. The screen flickers one last time before cutting to black. A cold silence follows, broken only by the faint hum of the terminal systems. KYX stands frozen, unable to move. His mind races, the implications of what he's just seen too overwhelming to process fully. What had the humans seen? What did they know? What was so terrifying that it led them to withdraw from the Senate, without a fight? Without any resistance? The file suddenly disappears. It vanishes from the screen, as if it had never existed. The records self-destruct, erasing any trace of its existence. The room seems to close in on KYX. The air growing heavier, thicker, pressing in on him like a physical force. He steps back, his legs unsteady as the weight of the knowledge settles upon him. His breathing quickens, but he knows that he must understand. He must know what the humans were preparing for, what the Senate had kept hidden for so long. Before he can think further, the sound of a door sliding open slices through the tension in the room. KYX whips around. There, standing in the doorway with an air of cold authority, is Chancellor Ovar. His reptilian eyes gleam in the low light, sharp and unyielding. Behind him stand two armed guards, their silhouettes imposing against the stark lights of the hallway beyond. Ovar, you shouldn't have seen that. KYX's stomach drops. The fear he had felt earlier, the palpable sense of wrongness, crashes over him again. Stronger than before, there is no longer any doubt in his mind. The Senate has something to hide. Something so dangerous, so horrific, that they have gone to great lengths to keep it buried. And now, KYX knows too much. Before Ovar can take another step, KYX turns and bolts, his footsteps echoing in the silent halls of the Senate complex. The adrenaline pumps through him, each heartbeat louder than the last. His mind races with fear and determination. And he knows that if he's caught now, there's no going back. But as he reaches the corner of the hallway, an explosion of noise erupts behind him. Alarms blare through the building, their shrill sound cutting through the air like knives. A burst of panic surges through him. He sprints faster, his breath ragged, his eyes darting ahead toward the docking bay. The exit is just within reach, freedom. The truth, everything he needs to escape from the grasp of the Senate. Just a little further. But just as the docking bay doors come into view, a bright flash of light strikes him in the back. His body jerks as the stun blast hits, and his vision blurs. He collapses to the ground, his muscles locking in place. The last thing he sees before the darkness overwhelms him is the cold, calculating gaze of Chancellor Ovar, an expression that promises more than just punishment. It promises a truth that is far more terrifying than he could ever have imagined. When KYX comes to, he is disoriented, his head pounds, and his hands are bound tightly in front of him. The sterile scent of a ship's interior assaults his senses, and the faint hum of the engines vibrates through the floor beneath him. He groggily lifts his head, his blurred vision slowly focusing on the figure standing before him. Varn, you're lucky I convinced the Chancellor not to kill you. KYX's mind struggles to catch up with the situation. He's on a ship, there's no mistaking it now. The walls around him are made of sleek metal, the design sharp and utilitarian. The cold, efficient design of military vessels. He tries to sit up but realizes that his arms are still bound. Varn, but now we need to get away from the Senate. You've uncovered something they don't want anyone to know. KYX blinks rapidly, trying to clear his mind. His thoughts are still foggy. But the panic sets in again. The Senate, the distress signal, the Admiral's warning. His throat tightens. KYX. What are we running from? What does the Senate fear? Varn's expression darkens as he walks toward a console at the side of the room. He taps a few buttons, and a holographic star map flickers to life in the air between them. A blinking red signal pulses on the map, slowly drawing KYX's attention. The message that had come from the abandoned human research station. The signal is still active. Varn. The Chancellor wants to erase this signal. They're sending a fleet to destroy the station. We need to get there before they do. KYX's heart races. The urgency in Varn's voice, the gravity of the situation, pulls at him. They're not just running from the Senate, they're running towards something far more dangerous. The stakes have never been higher. The ship enters hyperspace, the stars stretching into long lines as they break through the fabric of space itself. But the deeper they travel, the more unease grows within KYX. The ship feels like it's hurtling toward a truth that he is not sure he's prepared to understand. As they approach the abandoned station, something shifts in the air. The power surges through the station's systems, as if the dead, cold structure is waking up from a long, undisturbed slumber. Energy crackles along its surface, and KYX can feel a cold dread creeping up his spine. KYX. Something's waiting for us. The ship docks with the station, the landing pads creaking under the weight of the craft. KYX and Varn step into the eerie, empty station. It's unnervingly quiet, and yet the faint hum of electricity vibrates through the walls. They make their way toward the command center, the floor littered with dust and debris from centuries of abandonment. But as they move deeper into the heart of the station, they realize something terrifying. The power is still running. They find a terminal, and as Varn accesses it, the screen flickers to life once more. The face of a human scientist, Dr. Elos Carter, appears on the screen, his eyes wide with fear. Dr. Carter, we were wrong. They never left. They've been watching. And now, humanity is coming home. The station shakes, and a cold mechanical voice fills the air. The words reverberating through the walls. Station voice. Final protocol, activated. The hair on KYX's neck stands on end. The final protocol. The dormant, waiting force is about to awaken. They are no longer alone. The eerie hum of the abandoned station's power systems echoed throughout the cold metal halls as KYX and Varn ventured deeper into the heart of the complex. Their footsteps were the only sound in the silence that surrounded them. The flickering lights casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. As they passed through the dim corridors, the weight of the moment pressed in on them. This place, once thought to be nothing more than a forgotten relic, was far from empty. It was alive. The flicker of the station's terminals now seemed to pulse with a strange vitality, as if something had stirred in the long years of disuse. The central AI, an ancient system that had been dormant for centuries, suddenly clicked to life with a chilling precision. A low, mechanical voice filled the air, its tone cold and authoritative, almost as if it had been waiting for this moment all along. AI voice. The fleet is online. The words were spoken without any ceremony, but they hit like a thunderclap in the silent expanse of the station. KYX and Varn exchanged a glance. There was no need for further explanation. The fleet, the one that had been lost, the one that had disappeared without a trace, was now awakening. Something far beyond anything either of them had ever imagined was beginning to stir. The station's large viewport came into view. The glass of dark, reflective surface that showed little more than the black void of space. But then, slowly, Shapes began to emerge from the shadowed edges of the station's orbit. At first, they were little more than silhouettes, massive and imposing, their features hidden in the vastness of the void. But as they drew closer, the true scale of what they were became horrifyingly clear. These ships were unlike any KYX had ever seen, far more advanced than anything in the galaxy. This wasn't just a fleet. This was an armada, humanity's lost armada. KYX, whispering to himself. This fleet, it could destroy the entire Senate. The ships were enormous, their silhouettes angular and sleek, crafted from a dark metal that gleamed ominously in the distant starlight. Their structures were unlike any designs KYX had seen in the Senate. These ships were not only built for war, they were war. Their forms were jagged, sharp, with blackened hulls that seemed to absorb the light around them, giving them an almost ethereal quality as they moved. Slowly, as if to confirm their readiness for battle, the ships began to power up. Lights flickered across their surfaces. Engines thrummed with a low, menacing growl, and the weapon systems hummed to life with a horrifying synchronization. KYX felt a pit form in his stomach as he watched the ships activate. Each one responding to a silent command. Each one poised for destruction. The sheer scale of the fleet, the technology, and the cold precision of its movements made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Varn, his voice grim, pointing to the ships. The Senate always wondered why Earth never returned. They never left. There it was, the truth that had been hidden for centuries. Earth, and humanity, hadn't vanished from the galaxy. They had left, yes, but only because they had known something the Senate had refused to see. They had known that the day would come when they would be needed. When they would have to return to face something far darker than any of the galaxy's leaders had ever dreamed. The ships, massive and powerful, moved with the eerie grace of creatures that had long been dormant. Now waking from their slumber, their weapon systems activated, and KYX could feel the air around him shift as the power coursed through the fleet. They were ready for something that had yet to come. As the last of the ships powered up, the station's command center flickered, and a new transmission appeared on the main console. A message, chilling and direct, filled the room. The voice that followed was unmistakable. It belonged to Admiral Victor Hale, the figure that had led humanity's retreat from the Senate. His voice crackled to life, but the words were clear, heavy with a weight that no one in the galaxy had yet fully understood. Admiral Hale, the Senate was never our ally. We left because we saw what was coming. The Harbingers, they are already on their way. The room went silent. KYX and Varn stood frozen, their gazes locked on the screen as a massive hologram emerged, showing the cold, heartless approach of an unknown fleet. The ships were unlike any the galaxy had ever seen before. They were dark, darker than anything KYX had ever imagined. Jagged, sinister vessels that seemed to cut through space like sharp blades in the dark. Their design was brutal, menacing, and deadly. Varn, his voice barely a whisper. Who are they? Admiral Hale. We call them the Harbingers. They are the reason we left. They are the reason humanity vanished. KYX felt a deep sense of dread fill his chest. The Harbingers weren't just an enemy. They were something else, something beyond the Senate's understanding. Humanity had left not because they were afraid, but because they had seen the storm brewing in the galaxy. The Senate had been blind, focusing only on their own power, while the true threat had been waiting just beyond the stars. The Harbingers were not just an invading force, they were the end. As the hologram of the Harbinger fleet filled the room, the true scope of the danger became evident. This was not a single fleet. This was a vast, horrifying armada, an overwhelming force of warships that would sweep across the galaxy like a tide, leaving nothing in its wake. The lights of the station flickered, and alarms began to blare. The sound echoed through the corridors, growing louder, more frantic, as the fleet readied itself for war. Admiral Hale, his voice steely. The Senate won't survive this without us. Will you help us, or will you stand in our way? KYX's heart pounded in his chest as he exchanged a quick glance with Varn. They had seen the truth that the Senate had buried for centuries. They had seen the terror that was coming. The question now was whether they would stand with humanity or face the consequences of their ignorance. KYX, his voice steady, but filled with urgency. What do you need us to do? Admiral Hale, his eyes burning with intensity, tell the Senate the truth. The words echoed in KYX's mind. The truth. The one that could save the galaxy from annihilation. The Senate had to know. But would they believe it? Would they accept it? Or would they, in their arrogance, continue to ignore the storm that was about to break over them? With a sudden surge of power, the fleet of humanity's lost armada moved forward. The engines roared to life, and the ships surged into the vast emptiness of space, heading straight for the Senate-controlled space. The galaxy held its breath as the two forces, one ancient, one newly awakened, prepared for the final confrontation. The stage was set. The war had begun. So, what do you think? What's the real reason Earth left the Senate? And who, or what, are the Harbingers? We want to hear your thoughts. Leave your comments below and let's spark a conversation about what could be the greatest mystery of our time. Stay tuned, because the story is just beginning, and trust us, you won't want to miss what comes next. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Ascension HFY Extra to join the hunt for the truth. The galaxy is full of secrets, and we're just getting started. Stay curious, and keep your eyes on the stars.